He woke to darkness and pain. His head throbbed, and each breath felt heavy. He lay on a cold metal floor, damp with dripping water and oil. Above him, broken lights flickered, casting weak glows that danced on the walls like ghostly fingers. Strange echoes bounced through the empty corridors, making him question every sound. He tried to move his arm and felt a sharp sting in his side. With effort, he rolled onto his back and stared up at a grated ceiling, unsure how long he had been here or what fate had left him alone on this alien station. He struggled to sit up. His limbs trembled, and his vision blurred as he forced himself to stand. The floor felt uneven beneath his boots, covered in dust and debris. He saw twisted pieces of machinery and loose wires hanging like vines. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each second. His heart pounded in his ears as he took a few steps. Guided only by faint glimmers of light, the station felt alive and hostile. As if it breathed around him, every footstep echoed like a warning in the vast, hollow space. As he moved deeper, he spotted a damaged control panel on the wall. Its screen was cracked, but a few symbols still glowed in a dull, blue light. He crouched and wiped away dust, his fingers trembling. He tried to press the nearest button, and a spark shot out, startling him. Cables sparked, and a hiss of steam followed. For a moment, the lights brightened, revealing more of the station's ruined interior, shadowed doorways, broken consoles, and the occasional drip of liquid from overhead pipes. He felt both hope and dread, unsure if he could restore power or unleash something far worse. A sudden groan of metal echoed down the corridor. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. The noise came again, slower this time, like heavy machinery. Waking from a long sleep, he glanced behind him but saw only darkness. In front, the corridor stretched into deeper gloom, and the hum of distant engines pulsed like a heartbeat. He swallowed hard, remembering his training. As an engineer, he knew he could handle machines, but he had never faced a station so alien, so broken. Each sound made him pause, each pulse of light made his skin crawl. Without warning, a sealed door at the corridor's end began to shake. Its metal plating vibrated as if something huge pounded. From the other side, he took a shaky step forward, then another, drawn by both fear and curiosity. Sparks flew from a ruptured conduit overhead, and the lights flickered faster. Small pieces of metal rattled to the floor around him. The door's shaking grew violent, and he pressed his palm against it, feeling the cold resistance under his glove. He braced himself and pushed, and with a loud screech, the door slid open. Beyond the door lay a wire chamber, filled with strange machines and alien symbols etched on panels. In the center stood a tall column of glowing coils, thin tendrils of light wrapping around a core that pulsed like a beating heart. The room was silent now, the only sound his own breathing. He stepped inside, eyes wide, brain racing. He could not understand the symbols, but he sensed their power. A single wrong move might overload the entire station or bring it back to life. He forced himself to approach, each step slow and careful. He reached out and touched one of the coils. It was warm, humming with energy. His fingers tingled as tiny sparks danced across the surface. He pulled back, heart racing, then leaned it again. He remembered why he had come here, to help an alien research team, to share human ingenuity. But now, left for dead, his mission felt impossible. Still, the sight of this living core gave him a spark of hope. If he could tap into its energy, maybe he could rebuild the station or fuel his escape. Just as he steeled himself to act, the lights around him flickered off, the hum stopped, and the chamber went completely dark. He could hear distant footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and slow closing in from the far side of the room. His pulse hammered in his ears as he fumbled for a flashlight clipped to his belt, hands shaking. He clicked it on. A beam of light cut through the black, revealing a long, empty corridor behind him and the faint outline of something moving. Just beyond the glow, the flash of red lights from another panel bathed the walls in a warning glow. He swallowed hard, knowing the real trial was only just beginning. He pressed his back against the cold wall and took a deep breath. The taste of metal and oil filled his mouth as he steadied his shaking hands. The corridor before him lay in scattered darkness, broken by the weak glow of emergency lights that sputtered overhead. He pulled his jacket tighter, the weight of his tool belt pinching at his waist, and forced himself forward. Every step crunched on loose panels and twisted cables, and each echo reminded him how alone he was. Yet he knew he had no choice but to press on. He spotted a half-open maintenance hatch in the floor and knelt to peer inside. Below, pipes and conduits snaked through a narrow space, some still warm with the last pulse of power. He dropped a small toolbox down and followed, bracing himself on the rim. He landed lightly on the grated metal and crawled toward a thick bundle of wires that led into a ruined junction box. Rainwater dripped from overhead pipes, sizzling as it met hot metal. He clicked on his headlamp, the bright circle revealing a tangled mess that once carried the station's main power flow. The engineer took out a handheld scanner from his belt. The screen flickered, then beeped. He aimed it at the junction and watched numbers flash, voltage to low, circuits overloaded. His pulse quickened as the readings spiked and dropped. If he could splice in a bypass cable from the secondary circuit, the station might regain partial power, but the secondary circuit wound through the station's outer hull, where recent hull damage had left vents open to the void. Every moment spent here risked a sudden decompression. He swallowed hard and steadied his breath. He pried open the junction box's cover with a careful twist of his multi-tool. Sparks jumped between exposed contacts, lighting the cramped space in brief strobe bursts. He worked quickly, stripping wire ends and twisting them together, his fingers slick with oil and water. A pulse of air hissed past him, and an alarm from above signaled a breach in a nearby section. He froze for a heartbeat, picturing the pressure suit's warning lights flashing red behind his visor. He ignored the cold fear and continued. Secure the splice, tighten the clamp, seal the cover. Each motion was methodical, practiced, but his heart hammered with every second. With a final click, he snapped the junction cover shut. He backed out of the hatch and closed it behind him, wiping sweat from his brow. The emergency lights brightened briefly, bathing the corridor in pale white. He let out a sigh of relief that turned into a cough as dust swirled around him. He reached for the nearest wall panel and tapped a glowing symbol. The door beside him slid open with a groan, and he stepped into a larger room, a dim workshop, littered with spare parts, alien tools, and a low table holding a sealed crate of power cells. The labels on the crate bore strange alien script, but he could make out a symbol that matched the ones he saw on the control panel. Back near the command deck, he inspected the crate. The latch was jammed, likely from corrosion and disuse. He inserted his multi-tool's tiny blade and pried it open. The lid popped free, revealing a row of cylindrical cells that pulsed with soft blue light. They looked fragile yet potent. He picked one up and felt a faint vibration, like a heartbeat. In his gloved hand, checking his scanner again, he saw each cell held just enough charge to keep this section alive for a few hours. But the station's core needed far more. He weighed one in his palm and considered taking them all, knowing each step back would increase his exposure to danger, but without extra power. Every corridor would remain dark and every console dead. He stuffed 2 cells into his pack and strapped them on, the extra weight pulling at his shoulders as he reached for a third. The workshop's main door slammed shut behind him. He jumped, spinning around as metallic clanks rang out. The lights dimmed to an ominous red, and warning sirens wailed. He dashed to the door controls and scanned the panel. A brood of security bots, their lenses glowing crimson, blocked the exit. Their metal joints hissed as they advanced, scanning for life signs. He had seconds to decide, face them now with only a half-charged flashlight, or find another way out. He ducked behind a workbench and pulled out a small EMP grenade from his belt, a prototype device he had carried for emergencies. The bots clicked in unison as they moved closer. He twisted the grenade's cap, the software of its capacitor, charging, filling the cramped space. He counted silently, 3, 2, 1, then threw it toward the advancing machines. A bright flash enveloped the room, and a high-pitched ring filled his ears as the bots froze in place, circuits fried. He staggered forward, coughing in the afterglow, and pried open the door. Broken wires sparked at his feet, and the alarm lights flickered back to normal. He slipped out into the corridor, the weight of his decisions heavy, but his purpose clear. As he moved down the hall, the stolen power cells hummed against his back, a reminder of both hope and risk. He thought of the station's core, of the living heart he had seen still dormant, but not dead. If he could reach it, if he could bring enough power to awaken it, then perhaps this ghost of metal and wires would serve humanity rather than punish him. With each step, his resolve hardened. The true test of his skill and courage was only just beginning, and he would meet it head on. He sank to the floor of the quiet workshop, the hum of the power cells a distant comfort. As he closed his eyes, his mind drifted back to Earth. He remembered the first time he touched a circuit board in his father's small garage. His fingers had trembled with excitement as the lights on a tiny model robot flickered to life. He had been just 10, but he knew in that moment he would spend his life fixing machines. Back home, his city had prized engineers repairing broken ships, rebuilding solar farms, even restoring ancient satellites. His talent had been his ticket off planet and into the ranks of the Interstellar Engineers Guild. He recalled the day he said goodbye to his mother. She had pressed a faded photograph into his hand, a picture of their family gathered under a blue sky. "Bring us back something wonderful," she whispered, eyes bright with hope. He had promised to send word whenever he could to prove that human skill belonged among the stars. That promise had driven him to accept missions in dangerous sectors, to board derelict stations and restore their power. He had earned a reputation for calm under pressure until this station, where a surprise attack left him unconscious and a lone dot as his mind wandered. He saw the faces of his teammates, the alien scientists who had asked for his help. He remembered Commander Voss's gentle smile when they first met, a tall being with silvery skin and eyes like polished glass. They had shared stories of home over recycled tea, laughing as they compared human jokes to alien humor. He had felt a bond of trust, a silent pact that they would protect one another. But when the explosions had ripped through the research wing, that bond was shattered. Debris and fire had claimed his friends, and he had awakened hours later, battered and abandoned. He thought of the promise. He still carried the photograph tucked in his pack under sealed compartments. If he could repair this station, he could send a signal strong enough to guide a rescue ship. He imagined his mother's face when the message arrived, her pride outweighing any fear. That vision gave him strength. He knew he had to honor the trust of those who had fallen and the promise he made under Earth's sky. Fixing this station was not just a job, it was a mission of loyalty and love. A sudden flash of light from his headlamp pulled him back to the workshop. He opened his eyes, heart still pounding from the memory. The alien creative power cells lay before him like a trove of hope. He stood and brushed dust from his jacket, determination settling in his chest. The station's corridors felt less ominous now. Each step reminded him of home, of the people who believed in him. He tightened his grip on his toolkit and moved toward the hatch that led back to the main shaft. He climbed out and entered the corridor, lights flickering as the new cells powered sections of the station. He passed twisted consoles that had once terrified him and saw them glow with renewed life. In every corridor echo, he heard the laughter of his friends and the whispered encouragement of his mother. He carried their trust like a shield against fear. With each step, he returned closer to the station's core and closer to fulfilling the promise that had guided him. Across the stars, he pushed aside a fallen panel and stepped into a vast chamber unlike any he had seen. The ceiling, arched high above, its supports carved with swirling alien symbols that glowed faintly in the half-light. Along the far wall, tall cylinders held strange liquids in glowing shades of green and purple. Inside each cylinder floated what looked like plants, or maybe creatures in stasis. He felt a flicker of wonder and unease. Whoever had built this place had studied life itself. In the center of the room stood a circle of workstations, each one topped with tools he could not name. Long glass tubes crisscrossed from table to table, carrying bright pulses of energy like veins. He walked slowly among them, careful not to touch anything until he understood its purpose. At one station, a broken holo display showed an image of the station's layout. He reached out and tapped a cracked lens. The hologram shimmered, then reformed as a three-dimensional map. He saw rooms he had not yet explored, the reactor core, a communications hub, and what looked like a docking bay. His heart raced. If he could restore power to this lab, he might bring the whole station back online. But he needed more than just power cells. He needed the right receptor to channel energy into the main grid. His eyes fell on a small pedestal holding a diamond hard crystal, etched with the same symbols from the ceiling. It pulsed softly as if alive, and he realized it was the key. He lifted it gently, feeling a hum travel through his gloves. The crystal's glow brightened in his hand. He set the crystal into a fitting at the base of the console. Instantly, conduits along the walls flared with light. The tubes began to hum louder as energy flowed. Machines that had been silent for centuries clicked awake. He saw screens flicker on, showing streams of data he could barely read. With trembling fingers, He flipped a switch marked by a glowing glyph. A wave of sound rippled through the chamber, a low, rhythmic thrum like a heartbeat. The station was stirring. Suddenly, a projector on the wall activated, casting a scene from hours before the attack. He saw the alien scientists in white coats rushing through these halls, shouting in their own language. He watched their hands move over controls, heard alarms as breaches opened. Then the vision cut to black. He pressed a button to freeze the image, wanting to study it later. Those scientists had tried to save this station. Now he would finish their work. A soft alarm beeped on one console. He bent close and read the words in broken English: core temperature rising, stabilize or fail. He realized the lab was linked to the reactor across the station. Without a quick fix, the whole structure might collapse. He scanned the console and found a diagram of coolant lines. He traced the path to a valve control at the far end of the lab. Gathering courage, he ran along the newly lit corridor, dodging fallen debris and dripping steam. His pack of power cells thumped against his back with every step, reaching the valve. He saw it was locked by an alien-designed spiral keyhole that would not fit any tool he had. He pulled out his multi-tool and fashioned a makeshift key from a piece of broken piping. It took several tries, but finally the valve turned. A rush of cold mist hissed out, and the reactor's core temperature began to drop. Back at the console, the alarm silenced and the chart steadied into safe ranges. He exhaled deeply, sweat beading on his forehead. All around him, the lab's machines glowed with renewed life. He had discovered its secret and tamed its power. For the first time since he woke on this station, he felt hope swell in his chest. The path to rebuilding the station was clear and he was ready to walk it. He stepped into the heart of the station, where the main power conduit lay like a sleeping giant. The corridor opened into a cavernous room, its walls lined with massive coils and energy conduits that snaked toward a central reactor. Panels were scorched and wires hung loose, but the pulsing glow of the revived lab lingered here, a promise of life. He unshouldered his pack and set the two alien power cells on a worktable beside a broken flux regulator. His breath came fast as he surveyed the damage. The regulator's housing was cracked, its delicate circuits exposed to the cold air of space. He knelt and opened his toolkit. Metal tools clinked as he selected a fine-tip soldering iron and a spool of conductive filament. By headlamp, he studied the regulator's schematics etched faintly on a nearby console. His fingers moved with experienced precision, stripping insulation from wire ends and carefully reconnecting circuits. Every connection he made glowed briefly as the station's ambient power coaxed a spark. He paused when the regulator emitted a soft whine and alien hum he had not heard before. It sounded alive, like the breath of a sleeping animal. He felt a thrill of excitement and fear. If he faltered now, the whole station might reject the new power cells or suffer a meltdown. His forehead pressed against the console screen as he guided the soldering iron. Along a delicate junction, tiny beads of molten metal formed perfect seams. Sealing breaks that had waited years to heal. Sparks danced, and the coils overhead brightened. In synchrony, he sealed the last joint and stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. He pressed a button on the regulator's side and held his breath. A low rumble shook the chamber as the device powered on. The hum grew steady and strong. He retrieved one power cell from his pack and slotted it into the regulator's core chamber. The cell clicked into place, and the station shuddered as energy flowed outward. Lights flickered on panels around the room, revealing more corridors and hidden rooms. He saw monitors blink awake, showing readouts of reactor temperature, fuel levels, and shield status. The station was coming to life. Encouraged, he opened the other power cell. He carried it to a secondary conduit and fitted its connectors into a junction box. The station thrummed in response, and distant clanks told him that doors and valves were moving back into position. He knew this was only partial power, a temporary boost to stabilize critical systems, but it gave him time to find lasting solutions. A sudden alarm sounded. Core stabilization at 40%. Maintain power input. He rushed back to the regulator and adjusted fine-tuning dials, watching the meter climb. 45, 50, 60%. At 65%, the alarm ceased. He exhaled a long breath and allowed himself a small smile. The station had accepted his work. He stood in the flooded glow of renewed power and ran a hand along the conduit. The metal was warm, humming under his touch. He felt a deep sense of pride. A human engineer had breathed life into this alien fortress, yet he knew the true challenge. Leia had linking this chamber to the reactor's core and restoring full capacity, but for now, in this moment, the station was no longer dead. It lived again, and with it, his hope. He felt the station's heartbeat grow stronger as he left the power room. But the triumph was short-lived. A sudden burst of static crackled through the restored speakers, followed by a mechanical hiss. Ahead, a row of security drones powered on, their red sensor lights piercing the dim corridor. They moved with stiff precision, metal joints clicking as they scanned for intruders. He froze, the weight of his tool pack pressing against his spine, and he realized these machines would see him as a threat. He ducked behind a half-closed maintenance door just as the first drone rounded the corner. Its single red eye swept the hallway, then passed over him by inches. His heart pounded. He peered through a narrow slit in the door and watched the drones. Long, spindly arms flex. He knew these units were designed to protect the station at any cost. He had seconds to act. He tapped his belt for an EMP pulse device, a risky prototype that might disable the drones, but could also overload nearby systems. If it failed, he would face a squad of metal hunters alone. He took a shaky breath and slipped out into the corridor. The drones whirred as they detected motion. He sprinted toward a side hatch, placing quick sticky charges on the door's inner rails, with no time to arm them fully. He dashed around the corner and pressed a small detonator. A muted thump shook the station as the hatch's lock mechanism broke free. He slipped inside and slammed it shut behind him. The drones battered the hatch with heavy blows, sparks flying where metal met reinforced plating. He pressed his ear against the cold metal, listening to their circuits whine. He crouched low and thought through his options: fight them head-on, or find another way past. Remembering the glowing coolant pipes overhead, he crawled to the far wall and found a narrow service duct. It was barely large enough for him to squeeze through, but he had no choice. He pulled himself in, arms and legs scraping against sharp metal edges. The narrow space rattled as the drones pounded outside. He crawled forward, each breath thick with fear and determination. After what felt like an eternity, he spotted a grate ahead. He paused, wiped sweat from his brow, and pried it loose with a screwdriver. He pushed it aside and dropped into a secondary corridor, their red lights receding behind him. He lay on the floor for a moment, chest heaving, as the distant drone alarms echoed down the halls. He pressed himself against the wall and rummaged in his pack for a small data module. On it was a recorded command sequence from the lab's holoprojector and override code for station security. If he could reach the control hub, he might upload the code and turn the drones to his side. He slid the module into his tool port and watched the lights on its surface flicker. With a steadying breath, he rose to his feet. The path ahead led uphill toward the communications deck. With each step, the station's hum grew louder and more alive. He felt the weight of the power cells on his back and the hope in his chest. He would face the drones again, but this time he would be ready. Human ingenuity had brought this station back from death, and now he would bend its defenses to protect himself and unlock the station's full potential. He felt the station's heartbeat grow stronger as he left the power room, but the triumph was short-lived. A sudden burst of static crackled through the restored speakers, followed by a mechanical hiss. Ahead, a row of security drones powered on, their red sensor lights piercing the dim corridor. They moved with stiff precision, metal joints clicking as they scanned for intruders. He froze, the weight of his tool pack pressing against his spine, and he realized these machines would see him as a threat. He ducked behind a half-closed maintenance door just as the first drone rounded the corner. Its single red eye swept the hallway, then passed over him by inches. His heart pounded. He peered through a narrow slit in the door and watched the drones. Long, spindly arms flex. He knew these units were designed to protect the station at any cost. He had seconds to act. He tapped his belt for an EMP pulse device, a risky prototype that might disable the drones, but could also overload nearby systems. If it failed, he would face a squad of metal hunters alone. He took a shaky breath and slipped out into the corridor. The drones whirred as they detected motion. He sprinted toward a side hatch, placing quick sticky charges on the door's inner rails, with no time to arm them fully. He dashed around the corner and pressed a small detonator. A muted thump shook the station as the hatch's lock mechanism broke free. He slipped inside and slammed it shut behind him. The drones battered the hatch with heavy blows, sparks flying where metal met reinforced plating. He pressed his ear against the cold metal, listening to their circuits whine. He crouched low and thought through his options: fight them head-on, or find another way past. Remembering the glowing coolant pipes overhead, he crawled to the far wall and found a narrow service duct. It was barely large enough for him to squeeze through, but he had no choice. He pulled himself in, arms and legs scraping against sharp metal edges. The narrow space rattled as the drones pounded outside. He crawled forward, each breath thick with fear and determination. After what felt like an eternity, he spotted a grate ahead. He paused, wiped sweat from his brow, and pried it loose with a screwdriver. He pushed it aside and dropped into a secondary corridor, the red lights receding behind him. He lay on the floor for a moment, chest heaving, as the distant drone alarms echoed down the halls. He pressed himself against the wall and rummaged in his pack for a small data module. On it was a recorded command sequence from the lab's holoprojector and override code for station security. If he could reach the control hub, he might upload the code and turn the drones to his side. He slid the module into his tool port and watched the lights on its surface flicker. With a steadying breath, he rose to his feet. The path ahead led uphill toward the communications deck. With each step, the station's hum grew louder and more alive. He felt the weight of the power cells on his back and the hope in his chest. He would face the drones again, but this time he would be ready. Human ingenuity had brought this station back from death, and now he would bend its defenses to protect himself and unlock the station's full potential.